Well, Tom and I were talking, and we did a couple shows a few weeks back about lower inventory, high sales numbers, and one of the things that happens in a lower inventory market is a lot of folks, and especially in the last 6 months, we have done more new construction contracts than we ever have before in a 6-month period like that. So, and that is because when you look and you have 30 to 40% less inventory than you had this same time period last year. If you can't find the option with that lower inventory, then sometimes the only option is to go new construction. And one of the things is we have a great team. I have agents on our buyer side that specialize in helping clients with new construction. They've worked with numerous other builders, so they know how to help broker and get you the best possible deal because they've been in hundreds and hundreds of new builds, so they can help you through that process, make sure you're protected regardless of who the builder is, and help get you a great, great product. So one of the first things we do when we're talking to clients about new construction, and they come in and we sit down with them, and the very first thing we look at is time. And time can be a factor for a number of reasons. One is, what is your plan for housing in the meantime? You know, are we up against a deadline with an apartment lease? Do you have a 6-month lease that only has 2 months left on it, and we're going to do, say, a 4-month build?
How much time are you going to have to spend with your in-laws while the house is getting built? Right?
That's a great question, Tom. And we do. You don't know how many times I've had that conversation with buyers, and it's usually the wife looks at the husband, and the husband looks at the wife, and depending upon which set of in-laws it is, I usually get a response of not soon enough for them to get back to their own space. So that's exactly one of the factors. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, as we said. What type of costs are involved? And sometimes, you know, people don't want to break their lease too soon because they have a break lease fee, or sometimes when they, you know, convert to a month-to-month from a longer-term contract, it comes into play. So we just like to point out to folks to have those costs budgeted up front, and that interim housing is kind of one of the big issues that we look at. The other thing that comes into play when we're doing the same type of evaluation is if you have multiple moves, what type of storage is involved. And that can be a tricky situation. Sometimes people, it's hard to hit an exact date because builders they've got pretty good schedules and pretty good situations, but say, you know, they lay out for you a 4-month schedule, and so you've got a 16-week build, and we're getting ready to go into foundation, and then one of those famous cold snaps hits this time of year where it's, you know, 10 degrees for 2 weeks. Well, man, that's significant. When you take 2 weeks out of a 16-week build, they couldn't get the foundation in when they wanted to.
You can't pour concrete when it's that cold.
It's not a good situation, and they usually do not want to. So some of those factors come into play when we're looking at that side of things and figuring out exactly where we need to be. Also, the storage for your move. Do you have storage units? Is there enough storage? And have you sold your existing house? If we're not talking about somebody that's in an apartment or relocating, we're talking about somebody that is selling one house and moving to a new one. Of course, the ideal situation that we always start with clients is, you know, a lot of times people say, well, I just want to move from the house I'm in to my new house. Well, that can create some issues. Tom, I'm sure, is going to talk a little bit about financing with this process. But that is what I call a luxury situation. If everybody had that situation, sure, your new house is just about done. You don't need the money from your last house, which the majority of people do, and you're ready to move into your new house, then it's hard sometimes because do we know exactly when that house is going to sell? We're going to put it on the market. You get moved to your new house, and then you're carrying multiple mortgages for a couple months. Well,
logistically, just the idea of, okay, I'm going to start building this house. It's going to take 4 months, and then 2 months will go by, and then my house goes under contract at just the right amount of time, and then we set it in our contract for 60 days, and it magically all comes together at the end. It doesn't happen very often like that.
Well, and there's just so many moving parts to make that happen. The other thing in this market that we've had happen is you look at some properties, average days on the market is 33 days. You price a home, and with our lower inventory, sometimes you get that amazing first offer that you want, at full price or near full price, and they have a 28-day closing date on it. And so you're sitting there saying, oh, geez, I didn't think it was going to sell in 28 days. I thought it would take 20 to sell and then 45 to close. But for that buyer, they might need it at that specific time frame. And so then you're looking at interim housing for a month or 2 months. Lot of moving parts. So these are the types of scenarios that we go through with our buyers and sellers. One of the things that we have as our job versus, say, a new build rep that's just working on the new builds is we're looking at that entire picture for our clients. What are some of these solutions? What are some of these ways to move and help with the moving so that we can accomplish all of those goals? So it's funny because we get through points 1 or 2 that we think are so very, very important, and we haven't even talked about building the new house yet. So then, of course, the second thing that we come to that we look at is what is the site for your new build? What is the best subdivision for us to go into? And then we're coordinating that with your budget. So we look, and somebody will come to us and say, hey, I've talked to Tom, or I have an idea. I'm thinking about a $275,000 budget build total with the house and the lot. Where can I look? And so there's a couple different situations. You might like one subdivision, but that subdivision might be sold specifically to 3 builders. So you might then have to look at the pricing of those 3 different builders. And for that budget, can you get into that subdivision? The second choice then might be, okay, I can pick up an individual lot and then pick my own builder. But that is a process also because different lots have different requirements. Some subdivisions only sell to builders. Other subdivisions that you're at, if you're looking at a private lot, it might not be set up the way you want with utilities. So you're looking at where can I buy individual land, but then what is the increased cost of getting utilities and power out to the site? So site choice, along with your budget, becomes the next largest factor that we're looking at.
Another thing I could see that would be a challenge is, let's say someone does have a builder, they have a floor plan, they know the house they're going to build, and now you got to find a lot that house fits on.
Absolutely. And the sizing of it becomes super important. And there's different things that can happen, too, with permitting issues, requirements that specific city would have. Mm-hmm. What works in West Richland might not necessarily work in Richland or Kennewick. So there could be some increased permitting costs there that we're looking at. And so this is a process, and it can take a little while. I always suggest people to start looking at this situation, 5-6 months ahead of time, because that can really be a process that you go through to narrow down those specifics. The other thing that we look at is how large is the lot and does it have irrigation water? Are you wanting a half-acre lot, but there's half-acre lots out there and acre lots that don't have irrigation water? So then how much of that land can you actually utilize for your yard versus build sites? Can you have, and one of the big things we run into, can you have accessory buildings like casitas or shops on the property? What are the rules for those accessory buildings, and how do those fit into our lot choice? So coming right down to it, here in that first meeting, we've looked at a lot of stuff that hasn't even got into the actual construction of the house. And so that's really just prepping yourself for what you're going to need. The big factor here is there is a difference between financing just a purchase on a home and then going through a new construction loan process. So I'm super excited to have Tom Coyne here with us today. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about that new construction process with lending and then go into a few other key points that you need to be thinking about. A lot of lower inventory out there, not as much resale, a lot of people factoring in building and looking to build their new house. But there comes to be some complications in that process. And so we've been looking at some solutions to those complications, living arrangements, site prep, what you want to look for in a lot. And McKay, actually, I want to say it before we go into talking to Tom. He brought up a great point off the air, and that was the old adage in real estate. We talked about lots and site prep, but location, location, location. And really taking a look around your lot when you find it, and there's some risk factors. And so you want to look around and see, what do the neighboring properties look like? Are the CC&Rs controlled here? Can the neighbor paint his house Seahawks blue and green, like the house we saw in the news in Othello? And are you okay being next to that?
Can they build an apartment complex right behind me?
Absolutely. So thank you, McKay, for reminding me. The location, and taking a good look around you is super important. Also, a major important factor is getting the money right to make these builds. So, Tom, thanks for the suggestion for this show topic today. And yeah, walk me through, because it's different on the new construction process. Walk me through how things go with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. With the way the inventory's been, I just keep thinking the one way to solve our problem that we have of low inventory is to build more houses. And I feel like we're really seeing a lot of it. We're getting a ton of calls on new construction, and Umpqua has really made a big push in the fourth quarter of the year in revamping our construction loan to make it what I think is the most attractive program in town. So I love talking about it, and I'm excited to see how many we end up closing this year. But custom construction loans are different than if you're having the builder finance it. On a builder finance build, just like it says, the builder's going to finance the house, and when it's all completed, you're going to get a traditional loan to purchase that home when it's completed. Some builders, however, are going to require that you get a construction loan, and these are going to be more of your custom builders that require the construction financing. In the past, construction loans have been hard. They required more of a down payment. Costs have been really high. I want to say we're breaking all those barriers and rolling out what I think is, again, a great, great product. We offer a one-time closed construction loan. So at closing, your rate's locked. There's no need to modify. There's no need to refi. We pay off the land, and then we allocate all the money for the build. It all happens all at one swoop right at the beginning before the builder ever starts building the house. One thing that's really nice is our fee structure on these. We have a flat fee of $1,495 regardless of loan amount too, which is nice. There's not a 1% origination fee, nothing like that. Total closing costs, I'm talking title, escrow, appraisal, our fee, date downs, the whole deal. It usually lands around $4,300 on these construction loans.
Tom, and that is low. I mean, I've seen, I sit at those closings, review those HUD statements and stuff, and I've seen some of those, and that is a low amount.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is, and I think that's why we're really gaining a lot of market share and in a hurry with this program, is because of how low that fee structure is. Umpqua loves doing these construction loans. They have an appetite for it, and it shows with how competitive they price out the costs. Now, Lance, one of the greatest things, aside from how low the fees are, is we only require 5% down on these construction loans. And you guys probably remember when I first came on the show with Lance, we were Sterling. It was 30% down.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and a lot of times in the past, that was a big factor for a client's choice of doing new construction or purchasing resale, because sometimes they didn't have the 30% to do that. Mm-hmm. And so they ended up purchasing really the same style house, just 1 or 2 years old because of that.
Yeah, with this, it really opens the doors for a lot of clients. And it really helps a lot of builders out there, too, who can now really attract a wider range of clients, because the clients can now get their houses with just 5%. Now, that 5% down is based off of the acquisition cost of the build. And what goes into the acquisition cost is the cost of the land, the cost of the build, and what we call contingency funds. Now, contingency funds is something that we require, and it's 5% of the hard cost of the build. So I always explain hard costs like things you can touch, the lumber, the electrical, the plumbing. But it's kind of like what-if money. Like if you're maybe didn't allocate for a fence in your budget, but you're halfway through construction and you say, you know what, we want a fence. Well, there's money set aside for that. What's nice about this 5% in funds is it's there if you need it, but if you don't use it, it's never added to your loan. So it's a requirement, but it's a really nice luxury for people to have because there's always going to be stuff that changes.
Tom, can I interject here with a little story about contingency funds?
Let's hear it.
So I was building our house a couple years ago with my wife, and they said, you know what, you need to go and pick out your granite, And so you get to the granite store, right, and you look around there, and we're walking through, and then there was like a hole in the ceiling, and this light shining down, and angels flying around this one granite. And my wife is like, looks at me, and she's like, that's the granite that's going in our house. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about,
Was there music going on in the background?
Yes, and then you ask the salesperson, is this in our class of our budget of our granite? And
no,
you see this glazed look in his eye, and he's like, no, it is not. So situations like that happen where you're just like, and I remember we're like, Karen's was like, well, maybe you can install the sprinklers, honey, and and we can get the granite we want. And so anyway, I remember that. And so there are contingencies like that where you'll make a decision later, whether it be granite or, maybe you add a half bath where